Hi, thank you everyone for joining. We are lucky to work with Belinda, and Belinda is teaching right now. This is session, I think, number 4 on how to make Power BI work, for GP clients. So we are excited to see you. And then, we will be hosting actually full 4-hour classes like we are doing with Amber Bell for GP. We're going to be hosting soon a class for Power BI, which will be a half-day class.
Yep.
And thank you again. It's our honor to have you, and it's amazing what you do when you teach. So
Thanks. Yeah, I have fun playing in the world of make-believe. So today we're going to talk about, and thanks for the kind introduction. We're going to be talking about receivables management and Power BI. And specifically, we're going to be building out a trial. This is my, and it's got a bad grammar in it, sorry. My session description. We're going to build out an age trial balance inside of Power BI that runs independently of the age trial balance in GP. So you don't have to worry about whether or not you have aged your data or not. And then we're going to create a detail page that could provide us some additional information so that it could aid us in collections. We could take this a whole lot farther, but we only have an hour, and I have a lot that I want to show you. So I do want to give a special thanks to Marlene and Haley and everyone at DuxPro Dynamics for giving me a platform in which to share my favorite information. And the next session, Marlene is right, this is the 4th one. The 5th one is going to be GP, specifically SOP, Q&A inside of Power BI, and a little bit of AI. So it's some of the fun things that are in there that really have some wow moments, as I believe they're wow moments. And then if you're interested in, oh, look, here's more grammatical error. I was typing this real fast. If you're interested in what you see today as a hands-on course, this is going to be one of the things that we're going to be doing. We don't have a date scheduled yet, but we'll be scheduling the date this week. And it will be an inexpensive course. Of course, you could watch the video over and over and replicate it all. But if you want that hands-on instructor-guided experience, then I would suggest taking the half-day class, because it does cover a lot of different aspects of the Power BI. The module, and even creating a template, which is something we're not going to do today live, or creating parameters live. All right, so as we continue on our journey, our agenda is this. We're going to build an AR trial balance, and then we're going to get some additional information so we have that collection tool available for us. But first, I do want to step back for a moment and talk about the age trial balance that we're building today. So there's the historical age trial balance, which compares to, usually you're comparing to a specific point on your balance sheet. So if you're looking at November's financial statements, you want to see an age trial balance that matches the accounts receivable on your balance sheet as of November 30th. We are not building that. You can do it. It is clunky. But I haven't gone through and mapped that out. So we're going to be looking at it basically live, everything that's out there live, posted and unposted, if you want to add some of that in. And so the cool thing about that is that it's ongoing. It's something that you would use as a tool for everything that's going on right now, so we can monitor what's going on in our business. Okay, so we're going to be building the age trial balance one. So first, we're going to be using 2 out-of-the-box views: receivables, transactions, and customers. And I'm using these 2 views because they're part of GP out of the box. So once you install GP, they become part of your database. They're actually part of the Excel refreshable report. So if you follow the steps to deploy all of those, you have everything that you need, and you should have the rights you need as well if you go through the deployment situation for that. And one of the things I like about them is they're usually already in user-friendly language, which is really nice, and they have a lot of information. We're going to be chopping some of that up today. We're going to go in and get the receivables transaction information. These are the only columns we're going to use, so we'll be doing that in just a moment. And we're going to include voids, but I do want to remind you that we need to exclude voids anytime we're looking at transaction data. And that includes general ledger transactions, because if you make it so someone cannot delete a general ledger transaction, then the only way they could get rid of it is to void it. So it's part of history, but not part of the report itself. So we always need to make sure anytime we're looking at transactions, we're hunting for voids and removing them. If you build your own views, you could go ahead and remove those voids, and then you don't have to worry about it. And in the case of receivables transactions, there are 3 different values that could be populated. Voided, obviously meaning it's voided, normal, meaning not voided, and then it could be a value of null, which means it's not posted. It's an unposted transaction. All right. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm pulling out receivables is I like to pull out the receivable transaction type integer. Now, this is the receivable setup window. So if you go to receivable setup and then click on options in the bottom right-hand corner, this is the window. So you notice just to the right where we have all of those where the description column is, you could change the name of these descriptions. That's part of your implementation process for GP. That's why I don't like to use the names, because somebody could change the name of something. So instead, I prefer using integers, and they're a bit garbled here, but the red numbers indicate what the integers are. So for example, sales and invoices integer type 1, integer 1, payments, scheduled payments is 2. And scheduled payments would need to be a positive number if you use scheduled payments. Debit memos 3, finance 4, service 5, warranty 6. And then things that reduce the your AR balance are credit memo 7, returns 8, and cash receipts 9. And because these are the Excel refreshable reports, you're used to using Smart List, I'm sure. And when you pull up transactions in there, everything comes up as a positive number, even if it's something that reduces the receivable. So we need to be aware of the integer numbers so we could reverse the signs for integer type 7, 8, 9, which is credit memos, returns, and cash receipts. We're also going to create our own table for an aging bucket sort. I'll talk about that in just a moment. And then we're going to get a lot of fields from our customers. And so I have those listed right here. And I wrote pre-duplication because once we narrow it down to these, we're going to duplicate it. And then we're going to create a custom card and narrow it down further. One of the the original one, make it a customer card, just see customer information. And the duplicate copy, we're going to get rid of other fields and make that a customer credit. So we're going to divide the customers into 2 separate queries. Just FYI, I do have a handout that you guys are a giveaway at the end if you're interested. And I do set up parameters, and this is something I'll be going through in the class, but parameters is a way for me to let you install it and run it just as I built it on your own system. And this is just more about me applying the parameters. So let's go ahead and begin building. And here I am inside of Power BI. This is Power BI Desktop. If you are not sure about some of the things I'm talking about, keep with us, but then go back and watch number 1, the session we did number 1 on the DexPro site. That will give you a lot of the background to some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. And so let me show you, first of all, what I'm going to end up giving you guys. So when you get this little tiny file, and it is small, you would just go File, Import a Power BI template, and I've got it. I wasn't very original with the name, template, and the name of the class. And when you click on it, it's going to connect to your, prompt you to connect to your data. Now, it started out by saying, enter the name of your SQL server in my instance, and mine is BusyBee, and the name of your company. And I'm going into 2, doesn't have to be 2. And then I'll click on load, and then I don't have to do anything else until it finishes calculating. And then I could just do a file save and save it. And I then have a report I could use. And here's the report as we're pulling it up. So I have this summary age trial balance here that I could narrow down to see if it's which ones are for customers on hold. So let me go to yes. I don't know why that's not letting me. Let me clear. And now do yes. There we go. So these are all of the invoices due for customers that are on hold. And then I also have whether or not the customer is inactive or not. Right now, all of mine are active, so I don't have the option for yes, or I can narrow it down to salesperson. And these are the customer classes, and I have my own buckets, and you can create the buckets whatever you want. And they're color coded, so the darker the background color, the higher the value. So I mean, we didn't need those to see everything was in the, way ahead in the future. I'm working with Fabricam, but we could see that it populates across. Now, one thing cool here is if I were to open this up, and here is my buddy Aaron Fitz. If I right mouse click, I'm going to click on drill through and go to the customer detail, and I could see detailed information on Aaron Fitz. So this is something that you could get. I'll hold the shift key down or the control key and then the back arrow to go back. Once you publish this to the web, you don't have to press the control key. And then we're also going to have this calendar. And this calendar is payments we expect. And the more money coming in, and this is by due date, the more money coming in, it's green. The less money coming in, it's pink. So this is what we're going to be building right now. So let's go ahead and get started because I'm hoping we can get through it all. And if we can't, then you're going to probably have to finish the class. So I might take a few shortcuts and if necessary. So the first thing we're going to do is click on Get Data. And I'm going to go ahead and connect to my data. So I'll go to Database because that's where my data is located, and SQL Server, and then choose Connect. Now it remembers my credentials, so I don't have to re-enter them again. Otherwise, I would enter in the same credentials that I use for GP, and those are SQL Server credentials. And then it's asking me what server I want. Now I don't have the parameter set up in here, so this is normally what it would look like. And I'll key in my database, and I'm going to choose to import my data into the cache. We're not going to get into what direct query is right now, but for most GP users, import is going to be your best option. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And now I want to connect to both of those two queries that we talked about. And those are views. And you can see I have views listed like account transactions. Typically, if you could read it, instead of like ASI, it's a view. So if I were to scroll further, I could see tables. That's what a table looks like. And I could even connect to a stored procedure. So I could connect to all kinds of things. So first thing I'm going to do is start typing in receivables. And there is my receivables transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the checkbox because I know I want that one. And I'm going to save myself some time and also get the customers while I'm at it. And once I highlight it or click the box, I can see a preview to make sure I'm getting exactly what I want. Now, this is only looking at receivables data. It's not going into sales order processing. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on Transform because I want to do some data modeling in the query editor. If I click Load, it'll just load it to Power BI for use, but there are way too many columns for us to do that. So I'm going to click on Transform Data. And the query editor is going to open for us. And here are our two views that are queries we have. So in query editor, we typically call them queries. You hear me call them that a lot. In DAX, we're going to do a little bit of DAX, data analysis expression. It's just a formula tool, kind of like Excel formulas. In that one, we typically call them tables, but they're the same thing, the data connections. Now, the first thing I'm going to have us do is go through what I call Belinda's 3 rules. And we'll start with that's receivings. We don't want that. I do that all the time. I want receivables. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I know one of you, and click on new source so I can connect right here. I know one of you was going, that's not receivables. And you just didn't say anything. And it's okay to holler out if you see something. Busy B2. I do that all the time. Receivings is purchase order stuff. Receivables transactions. There we go. Okay. I should have looked at the preview and then I would have known. Okay, here we go. So I've got receivables transactions right here. Belinda's 3 rules to data modeling, and these 3 rules will save you a lot of grief. The first one is we want to name the query to something that makes sense. to our end users. And especially because they use it during Q&A, and that's like natural query language. So you could say what customer or whatever. And when they reference a specific entity, then it could be the name of the query. So with that being one word, it would be really hard for them to understand. So I'm just going to put a space in, and it'll make it easier for that individual to see. So renaming the query to something that makes sense is step number one. Step number two is we get rid of columns we don't need. If I were to zoom, and do I not have my zoom on? Oh yeah, I do. Okay. I have 311 columns. I certainly do not want 311 field options. You want to do your data modeling for the most technologically challenged person in your company, and giving them 311 fields to choose from in receivables alone is going to make them crazy. So what I like to do right away is remove those columns I may not need. Now on the home tab on the ribbon there, I'm going to choose the icon for choose columns, and I get this really nice filter so I could choose the columns that I want. Now I don't want to keep anywhere near that number, so I'm going to unselect all and then pick and choose what I want. And that handout that I had actually specifically tells you which columns I'm keeping. So I'm going to cheat and look at my cheat sheet over on the right. I want customer number, document type. I don't want the customer name because I'll get that from the customer file. I want document date. I want the document integer. So I'm just going to type in int and find that. And then I also want 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm missing one. Customer number, document integer. Oh, I can't see the integer. That's it. Okay. And then I want to get a couple of date. I got date already. Document date. Yep. So I want some amounts. One of the amounts that I want is current transaction amount. That is the unpaid balance of the receivables transaction. I also want document amount right now. Now, a couple things that I'm choosing aren't on that list, but I'm adding them in as part of my demo. Okay, I want document amount. I want document description. So I think that's all the amounts I want. Yeah. And then I want, let's type in document. I want document description. I want document status. And I want due date. If I'm doing an age trial balance, I need due date. I want the terms. And I'm going to get the terms from not from the customer, but from the invoice itself. And then I want the posted date. You might want the posted date. The date it was actually posted, or we could actually see the GL posting date. But I'm going to grab, this is the date it was actually posted. And then I'm going to get the sales territory just for some fields. And I'm going to get the salesperson and salesperson ID right there. And then the last thing I want is void status. And that leaves me with 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Beautiful. Okay, so now I only have 15 columns. So it's going to be a lot easier for the end user. Now, the third rule is to verify the data types. And Power BI is getting better and better at setting data types. But I like to check them all anyhow. And I'm going to just do a shortcut right now because I know I don't like the data types for the dates. These are set to date time. We could see the time, and GP does not use date time fields. If they're tracking a time, like the time you approved an invoice, then they actually store the time in a separate date time field. So the date's in one date time and the time's in another. And that is a recommended modeling methodology for Power BI anyhow. So I'm going to take this date column, hold the control key down, select the due date, right mouse click and go to change type. And I'm going to change those to a date. Now with them both highlighted, I could have also come up here at the top and chose date here. So now I'm only seeing the date. And because I'm going to have a date table, I definitely want to get rid of the time so that they'll match up exactly. All right, so I've got the date set. Let's deal with those voids. So here are my voids. You can see there's null. And if I click on this filter list, I could also see voided. Now, if you see a voided one, you could just uncheck it here and it'll work for you. But if you do not see a void, what you would do is come over here, click on text filters, and you could say does not equal, and then you could type in the part you do not want. This display is only showing us the first 1,000 records. So if you have a voided one, it could be 1001 and therefore it wouldn't display, or you maybe never had a void, but you need to account for it just the same, because sure enough, as soon as you don't include it, somebody's going to end up voiding something. It's going to make numbers look crazy and just not going to work out. Okay, so now that we have that done, we also now have these null ones. These are the unposted transactions. So what I'm going to do, you notice the data type here is ABC. If I click on it, I could see that's text, and that would be what I want. And normally I would change the names here on the template I give you. You could see, so you could tell it what you're doing, like rename, filtered rows. I could say removed voids. And it makes it easier to find out what you're doing. And you could always go back onto a gear and repeat a step. But I want to deal with these. I don't need to deal with these voids. I don't need this column anymore anyhow, because all I wanted this column for was to exclude voided transactions. So I'm just going to right mouse click and remove that column. And now I'm down to 14 columns. I got my void all covered. All right, so now that we have that, I'm going to move over to document status. And on the document status, you can see I have posted and unposted. So this is something that you may want to exclude unposted transactions, or you may want it for a filter, for example. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave the document status right there. Posting date, again, oh, I did not set this type to, but I just wanted to show it to you here. This is not something that we need to do anything with. So I just wanted to show you, you could literally keep track of the posted date. So you could see what changed your system, what date something changed your system. Because the way we're looking at this, we're not really dealing with fiscal periods. We are only dealing with like actual dates, due dates, the date of the transaction, the date of the due date, and in this case, what date was posted. And if you want to see what date it affected the general ledger, then you would add the general ledger date. I'm going to go ahead and just remove this one as well. I just wanted to show you that as an option. Now I'm going to be creating a link from receivables to customers by customer number. So I want to ensure that there's no blank spaces at the end. Even the Microsoft view, sometimes they have blank spaces. And if you just click on one of the fields here and then down at the bottom, click, let's zoom in. You can see my cursor is immediately after the 1. If there's blank spaces, it would be off to the right a little bit. But I prefer to be safe over sorry. So what I'm going to do is just highlight this whole column. I'm going to do it the long way this time, and I'll start doing it the shortcut later. We're going to go to transform, and then I'm going to come up to format and choose trim. I prefer to just right mouse click most of the time, and you'll see me doing that an awful lot. Okay, so let's deal with the current transaction amounts and the document amounts. One of the things you're going to notice here is there's some nulls here, and you're probably thinking, why are there nulls? If the current transaction amount, if it is a posted transaction, it will be null for it'll be null for unposted transactions, and the document amount will be null for posted transactions. So that's why we have both of these transactions. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to eliminate any invoice that's paid off, because I'm only interested in what's past due, or in the GP terms, anything unapplied, including payments. So what I'm going to do on this current transaction is just simply click on this filter, and I want to get rid of 0. And likewise, you could do the number filter here, but I'm just going to uncheck 0 and go ahead and click OK. And you notice on this step, there's gear. If I click on it, then it actually did it the way we would have long-handed it like I did the voided one. It'll, if you go in and say number filter, you would get this option. All right, so I got rid of the zero. So now we're only looking at transactions that have a balance with them. So now what I want to do is anything that is, let's see. Oh, I'm going to take the null. Anything in null in these two columns. I'm trying to stay in order so I don't jump ahead and forget something important. Anything that has a null, I want to replace that null with a 0. So I can just add these two columns together and then just have one document amount or one balance amount. So I'm going to take this column and then hold my shift key down and select the document amount as well. And now I can do because they're both decimal numbers, if I were to go in and on the, I right mouse click there, forgive me for that, go to transform and replace values, I could do both columns at one time. Otherwise, you could do them one at a time. I'm going to say find the nulls and replace it with a 0. And then now when I add these two columns together, I'll have a column number that is correct, right? It won't get an error by trying to add null to 5350. So now I'm going to add these together and create a balance column. And so to do that, I'm going to come up to the top and choose add column and then choose custom column. Now I'm pretty cautious about adding custom columns like this. I add a lot of unique columns using conditional columns, but this one you have to write it in something called the M language. And if you're doing simple math, it's super simple. I'm very, very cautious about using this except for simple math. So we're going to call this new column we're creating balance. And I'm going to find the credit or the current transaction amount, the unpaid balance. And I'm going to insert that. You don't have to put the spaces, but it's easier to see. And then I'll put the plus sign. And then you could also double click. So here is my simple math. I'm adding those two columns together. I have no syntax errors. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now at the end, I have this balance column. Now this balance column, it says, if I zoom in, it says ABC 1, 2, 3. And that's because Power BI only tries to evaluate what kind of column you have at the beginning. So now I'm in the middle. I manually created this. It doesn't know. So I'm going to need to come in and tell it it's a decimal column. All right. Now I no longer need those other two columns because I really want them to act as one. So I'm going to come in and highlight both of them and remove columns. Now it's okay I remove them because if I come all the way, just like I did the voids, if I come back up here, I could see them. I just clicked on my steps. There's no balance at the end and I can still see my void status. But when I go to the very bottom, the void status is gone, the balance is there, and those other two columns are gone. Now we're down to 12 columns for this particular transaction. I told you I was going to go fast. All right, so now that we have our balance column right here, I want to make sure that, let's see, conditional and amount. Oh, I did them separate on mine, but we'll do them once here. What I'm going to do is highlight this balance column. Now I'm going to go ahead and handle credits, returns, and payments. I need to make those numbers negative because they're not showing up negative. This is the same view that Smartless uses. So I need to make those negatives. What I'm going to do is highlight this column and I'm going to come in. I don't need to do an add custom column. And this time I'll click on add column. And because it's a number, this column is a number. This is why I go through Belinda's rule number 2 and verify the column type, because the fact that it's a number, setting the column type to decimals tells me I can do math with it. And one of the things I'm going to do from a number is multiply it times -1. So I'm going to add a column that takes this column and multiply it times -1 just to get a reversal. So I'm going to click on standard and choose multiply. And it says multiply it by what? I'm going to put in the value of -1. And now I have a balance column and I didn't rename it, but a multiplication column. So one is the positive version and one's the negative version. Now I need to tell it which one to use when. Now you remember when we were looking at that screenshot from GP, we know if it's 7, 8, or 9, it should be negative, meaning get it from multiplication. And if it's 1 through 6, it should be positive or get it from the balance. So what we're going to do is go to add column again, choose conditional column, and I'm going to name this column, I probably should have named it balance before. So we'll call it amount due. Why not? I should have waited to name that balance. And now I'm going to say if, and I'm going to find the document integer type. If the integer is, because that's also set to, actually that's set to text. Look at there, because now it's like equal, does not equal, and so forth. Let me cancel that, and I'm going to come back here, and actually I'll stay zoomed in. I can see that's set to text. So I'm going to click on that text and set it to a whole number. That's why you want to check those, because I don't want to have to go, if it's 1, then positive. If it's 2, then positive. I want to be able to say, if fortunately they work out like this, if it's less than 7, it's positive, otherwise it's negative. So now I'm going to come up to add column, conditional column. Yeah, I just did it that way so you could see this. It was my intention to show it to you this way, but I didn't know I was going to be zooming in. So I'm taking credit for happenstance. All right, so we'll call this amount due. And I'm going to say if the column is the integer column, if it is less than, let's just say less than 7, and I'll manually type in 7, then I want it to get the column called balance. Otherwise, get the column called multiplication. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I have this amount due column. And if I were to come in, let's see, over here, and let me filter to payments, for example, these would be unapplied payments. You could see that it's showing me a -1. If I were to change that from payments to invoices, you could see I have positive numbers. Let me just clear that filter. So that's what this does for me. So I'm going to set this to a decimal number because I want to make sure it works like a number, so that when it's in the other, when I'm in Power BI, it'll sum it up. You saw I had problems with the integer when I didn't do that before. Now I no longer need these two columns because one is just the duplicate of another. It would confuse that technologically challenged person to have 3 separate fields. So I'll just right mouse click and choose remove columns. And now I have my amount due. Now what I'd like to do is deal with some date issues that we may have, particularly when we're dealing with due date. Now I said I was going to create a date column or a date table, and I'm going to let my date table actually create dates from every date it could find in my system. So as you're used to seeing in GP somewhere in here, let's see, credit memos and returns and payments have a due date of 1/1/1900. And if I have a date table creating with that, I don't want it to start at 1/1/1900. I want it to, because that's like a null date. So what I'm going to do, both of these are date fields. I'm going to highlight the due date and the document date just to be safe. And I'm going to go back to transform, replace values. And I'm going to say if the value is 1/1/1900, then I want it to replace it with null, and then go ahead and click on OK. And so now I have that null number. And then when I do my automatic calculation, it will not use 1/1/1900. It'll just use actual dates that it sees. All right, so now that I've got my date done, what I want to do is, let's see, I got my date. I want to fix my due date. So I'm going to just rename this real quick to due. Actually, let me remove that filter. No, I want to keep that filter in. I was just being silly. Okay, sorry. Bear with me. This is what you get when you try to follow along too closely. is null. Okay. And then I'm going to just call that due. Okay. The reason why I named it due is I can have two columns with the same name, and I want to create a new column called due date. And to do that, I'm going to use that conditional column again. So I'll choose add column, conditional column. And I'm going to use that integer as well, because again, if it's a credit memo, return, or a payment, I wanted to use the document date as the due date. Otherwise, I want to get the due date from the due date column. Does that make sense? That way I don't have to worry about what date a return might have or where it will show up in my aging bucket. So I'm going to call this new column due date. And I'm going to say if the integer, just like I did before, is less than 7, then I want to get the date from the due column. Otherwise, I want to get it from the document date column. And then I'll click OK. And I need to make sure that's set to a date, so it'll act like a date. And now I can get rid of my due column and my integer column. I no longer need those columns anymore. So now I have a due date that has a date that will age for everything, even returns and credit memos. And if you wanted to, you could add in an additional column that added like 30 days to the credit memo or return if that's what you wanted to do. But all right, so I've got all of that in, and now what I'd like to do is age this due date, get how many days it is since the due date, so or until the due date. So I'm looking out into the future, right? When is it due? How many days is it due? So I'm going to highlight the due date column. I'm going to choose add column again. And now you notice this time the date area is lit up, not the number. And I'm going to click on date, and I'm going to choose the option to age. Now when I age here, it actually shows me how many days between today and that day in days, hours, minutes, and seconds. And I don't want that. I only want days. So I'm going to click on that and change that from duration, which is what it is, to a whole number. And now I can see how many days. Now, also while I'm looking at this, this is like kind of in the reverse, right? It's a negative 198 days since the due date. I need to make it how many days until the due date. So I need to reverse the sign here. So what I'm going to do is come over to transform, because I want to transform this column. Now it's a number again, so I can now see the number here. And I'm going to click on the drop-down list. I'm going to multiply this times -1, just like we did that other multiplication one. Except this time I'm transforming, I'm not just adding it. A new column, and it did set it back to a decimal. I'm going to go ahead and set it back to a whole number. That was the multiplication that did that. Or you could just, it does a change for you. You could just clear that out. But there we go. I have the number of days until it's due. So if it's past due, it'll show up negative. Otherwise, it's going to be positive. And then the last thing that we're going to do on this particular query, yeah, most of our time is spent in query editing, our data model editing, is we're going to put in buckets. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat factor here, and I'll show you why in a moment. So what I'm going to do is look at the number of days and create an aging on the buckets. So I'm going to come up to add column, add conditional column, and I'm going to call this aging buckets. And I'm going to say if the number, I'll zoom in, if the age, actually, you know what? Let me rename this to days due. I'm going to rename that due in days. There we go. I like that better. I'll add the conditional column. I'll zoom in so we can see what I'm doing. All right. And we will call this aging buckets. And on the column that I'm evaluating, I'm going to evaluate the number of days till it's due. And if it is less than, because that's a number, I could do that. I could say if it is less than 0, then typically I'd want to say it's past due. But because it's going to end up being a text field, because we're going to have letters in it, it would end up sorting alphabetically. So what I'm going to do is do a little bit of a cheat here, and I'm going to say use 1. I'm going to make like a aging ID. And actually, you know what? Maybe I'll just call this aging bucket ID. Oh, no, cheat and copy that. Okay. And then I want to add a bunch more of these in. So I'll do due days. I'm just cheating a little bit here. Due days. Okay. So I'm going to say if it's not less than 0, is it less than or equal to 30? And if it is, I'm going to make that 2. And then if it's not that, is it less than or equal to, whoops, that's greater than 60. And I'll make it 3. And then I'll have less than or equal to 90. And I'll make that 4. And then less than or equal to 120. And I'll make that 5. And then the other result would be 6 if it's more than 120 days. So let me zoom out. I tried to touch somewhere else and it went crazy on me, sorry. So I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna go ahead and just make this a whole number. This is an ID that I created. Great. And now what I'm gonna do, I just noticed something I needed to change over there. Okay, so now I've got my aging bucket all set. So everything is all set to rock and roll. Let me go ahead and add in that table for the aging bucket. So what I'm going to do is click back on the Home tab, and there's this option up here called Enter Data. Now, as a rule, you can't edit data itself or enter data. You can only perform steps that can be repeated, and they get repeated in these applied steps. So you have this refreshable process. But if you have some static data, you don't have to put it in Excel and then import it in. You can come in and go right to enter data. And that's what I'm going to do here is basically create a static table. And I'm going to call this aging, I don't know why I keep misspelling aging, buckets. And I'm going to have 2 columns. One will be called my aging bucket ID, and the other will be called my aging bucket. Okay. And what I would typically do is say, all right, if it's 0, because remember we had 0, that would mean, and I did not mean to press tab. You got to be careful here when you're adding data, because it's very easy to add another column. Don't tab thinking you're going to go to the next field. If you tab, you're going to get a new column. So you got to keep clicking on the asterisk to add a new row. This one would be called past due. And then I'll click to add another new row. And I could keep working my way down, but I'm going to cheat. Click on the asterisk and paste. All right, so now I have my aging bucket all set. That actually should have been a 1, not a 0. So I have this little tiny table, not taking up any extra room, that will help me with my sorting. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now I have this aging bucket right here. That is whole numbers, that's fine. That is text, that's fine. So now we're ready to move on to our customer query. Belinda's 3 rules again. Name it to something that makes sense. We'll leave it customers. We have 182 columns. We definitely need to clean these up. So I'm going to click on choose columns and pick the ones I want. I need customer number, so I have a link, but here's where I'm going to get the customer name. I'm going to get the address just in case I need it. I'm going to get the phone. I'm going to get the contact person. I'm going to get the credit limit amount. I'm going to get the customer balance. I'm going to get the high balance lifetime to date. I'm going to get whether or not they're on hold, whether or not they're inactive, and I'm going to get some of these last payments. So our last numbers, last payment amount, last payment date, last statement amount, last statement date, last transaction amount, last transaction date, and that covers it. So let me see if I've got everything that I needed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 12. I missed country, but I don't really care about that. let me verify what I'm missing. Anything important? City, state, zip, phone, contact person, credit limit. I want that one. Customer balance. I guess the rest don't really matter so much. Customer number, name. I think country's all I missed. Okay, cool. All right. So now that I have that done, I need to do a little bit of modeling here. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is over on the left, I have customers here. I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to choose to duplicate. That way I don't have to connect again and I don't have to narrow down to just those columns. Now I'll come back up to customers up here and I'm going to make this my customer card. And the first thing I'm going to do, if I try to go right in to remove other columns, I'm going to see all those other columns and I don't want to have to deal with those. I want to just deal with the shortened list. So I'm going to go ahead and trim the customer number so I can create that link. So this time I'll just right mouse click and choose transform trim. I find that easier than going transform format trim. Okay, now if I go to choose columns again, I can pick and choose the ones that I want. And I don't want anything with a number on it. I only want customer information and whether or not they're on hold and inactive. And for the most part, that covers everything I need to do here with one exception. So I'm gonna just leave that. Well, I'll take that out, that one on the name. The third rule is you check the type. They're all text. That's good. The phone number here, the way the phone number comes over from GP is a lot of craziness. So what I'm going to do is right mouse click here, and I'm going to choose to split column by positions, and I'm going to tell it where to split. So I want it to split at the beginning, so I'll type in a 0. I want it to split on the third, after the third, the area code, and then I want it to split on it's position 6, which is the first 3 digits. And then I want it to split on position 10 so that the extension's off by itself. So I'm just telling it where to split. And now I have these 3 sets of numbers here. Now you notice it changed it to numbers from text, and look what it did to the extension. And look what it did to like 022. We don't want, now that's probably a country, but we don't want it to remove leading zeros. So what we're going to do is simply come and remove that changed, and now they're back to text. It tried to change for us and it didn't do a good job, so we're removing it. And now what we can do is now put them back together in the format of a phone number. So I'm going to select the order carefully and select first the area code, then hold the shift down, get the second 3 digits, and then the last 4 digits. I'll right mouse click, I'll choose to merge, and I'm not going to worry about a merge name right now, but I'm going to do a custom separator, which will be the dash. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. And now I can see the phone number in the format in which we're used to seeing it. I'm going to add the extension just in case you have that populated, but you could delete it if you don't use the extension. So I'll select this merge column and then hold the shift down and grab the phone. And then I'm going to choose to merge once again. This time I'm going to call it phone. And here on the separator, I'm going to put a space, EXT space as my separator. So now it actually shows me the extension number. Okay, that's pretty cool. And you could have added a step in between to get rid of the 0. Now let's come to our duplicate of the customer. And on our duplicate, what we're going to do, we're going to name this to customer credit. And again, we want to trim the customer. I guess I could have done that before I duplicated. That probably would have been easier. Let's see, transform, trim. And now I'm going to go to choose columns again. And this time I still need the customer number. So I have that link, but I'm going to get the credit limit, the balance, the high balance, and then all of these numerical and date fields, and then click OK. And now I just have 10 columns here. Now we know we need to clean up the dates. So I'm going to highlight all the date fields. And then on home, this time I'm going to just come up here and choose text. And now they're all, did not mean to do that. Let me go back and change that to date. and I'll replace my boo-boo. There we go. So now we have dates. Now, again, we might have 1/1/1900. We don't want our dates to pick those up, but nor do we want to see them as the last payment date. So what we're going to do while they're all highlighted is I'll go to transform. I'm going to choose replace values. And I'm going to say, if it's 1/1/1900, I want it to be null. And then click OK. And I think that's all we need to do here. If you want to add columns like the day since the last transaction, you could do that just like we did for the aging. I'm not going to do that here right now. So now I'm going to click on home and close and apply. That's because we only have like 7 minutes. And I know I'm going to run over a little bit. So my apologies for anybody that has to leave. Hopefully you could pick up at the end. Actually, just in case, while let me go back to my slideshow for a moment. If you want to get that GIF, because I'm going to be showing this at the end, go ahead and click on it now. It will only work for today. So take a QR code or use bit.ly/DexPro Belinda, and you can get to that link. So I will put this link in the chat. And again, it's only going to work today. So don't know that I can get it in the chat. Haley or Marlena, perhaps one of you guys could put it in the chat if someone has to leave early. Okay. Now what I want to do is I need to get my dates. Now, one thing that you should do with all your reports or for all your Power BI is click on File and then go to Options and Settings, Options. And then what you're going to want to do for, let's see, oh, right here on data load for global, you're going to want to uncheck time intelligence. And then that way you won't get date hierarchies for all your dates. And the reason why you want to do this is the more data you have, the more processing that's going to have to occur. We're going to manually enter in the date we want time intelligent and build our own time intelligence pieces. So this is something we want to turn off. And once you turn it off, you will need to exit out of Power BI and then go back in. And you may need to fix it for each one, but you'll have much better processing time with that. And as a result, you're going to want to add a DAX table in. And I'm going to cheat and just paste it in. The script is in my data set, or the Power BI. I'll show it to you in a moment. And then if you're watching this on recording, you could just pause and look at it. But I'm going to go to modeling and add a new table and then paste in a whole date table. So what's going to happen here is it's going to do an auto calendar based on all the dates I have. It recognizes December is the last month of my calendar year. If you're not on a calendar year, then this one doesn't have time intelligence, so don't worry about that so much. Then I'll have a column for year, a column for month number, a column for month, weekday number, weekday, what week it is in the year, the quarter, the year in the month, and the year in the quarter. And then I'm going to click on this check mark to commit it. There we go. I think it committed it. It did. So now when I come over into my date over here, I can see all of these date fields. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this date and format it. Normally I format all the dates. This is how the date will appear, right? So even a date only field can might show up looking like that. We might even want to come in and just say this is just date. Okay, so we've got that done. What I want to do is set this as my official date of record. So what I'm going to do is go to Table Tools, mark as Date Table, and then I'll tell it what date field I'm using. And this date field was created based on all the dates that are in there. And if I were to resort this, you could see it'll start. The first year I have is 2020. So it starts with January 1st, and it'll create, even if the only date in 2020 was December 30th, it'll start with January 1st and have a date accordingly. Now what I'm going to do is, you're probably wondering why I have month number and month and weekday number and weekday. I'm going to highlight month number. I want this to sort in a particular order. I want it to sort chronologically, not alphabetically. So I'll highlight month, and on column tools, I'll choose to sort by column, and I'll sort by month number. And then I'm going to do the same for weekday and the weekday number. And now I no longer need the weekday number and the month number to appear in the report. Now I can't delete it. This isn't Query Editor because there's no remembered steps, but I can hide it from that technologically challenged person. So I'll right mouse click right here and choose or mark or select hide in report view, and notice how it dims out. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. Okay, now that I've got that done, this is all looking good. I'm going to quickly go to my aging bucket, and I'm going to do the same thing for my aging bucket. I'm going to highlight the aging bucket. I'm going to choose sort by column, and I'm going to sort it by this ID. So no matter what the text says, it'll always put past due first. Now I no longer need this, so I'm going to hide this from report view. Now let's go in and model our data. So I clicked on the data modeling tab. And one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on manage relationships. I want to delete all these relationships that are already out here. I want to manually control my relationships. And you could automatically turn off where it doesn't create the relationships for you. And if I were to click on close now, you could see nothing has a relationship. But I am doing what's called like a star schema. And this is the way my data is going to connect. So receivables transaction is what's called my fact table. That's the one will keep getting longer and longer. And then it connects to the aging buckets, the date, the customer card, and the customer card will connect to the credit. So just to make it easier, I'm going to go to manage relationships. And I'm going to create my relationship. So I'll click on new, and I'm always going to start with receivables. That's my center. I'll go to aging buckets, and it found a match for me. So that's a good thing, aging buckets to aging buckets. So I'll select that. Then I'm going to add in my date table, connect it. So I'll go with receivables to date. And this time I'm actually going to go to the due date and connect the due date to the date, because that's what I'm really focused on, is when these things are due in this particular scenario. And notice the cardinality is many to one. The date's only one time here and it's unique, and there could be many transactions with the same date. And we always want to try to make sure for ease that our cross-direction is single direction. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK there. This time I'm going to connect my receivables to my customer card, and notice how it automatically selected these because the name is the same and the data type is the same. That's how it knew. Many to one, single, that looks good. And then for my last one, I'm going to connect that customer card to the customer credit. So I'll choose customer card, and then I'll choose customer credit. And again, they're selected. This is a one-to-one because the customer only exists one time in the whole table. And then I'm going to click OK, and then I'll choose close. And now I have my relationships all set. Now, another thing that I typically like to do, you could see the aging bucket here, ID here is hidden. It's got the little eyeball that's crossed out. I like to also come in and hide them. Make sure that like the aging bucket only appears in one place. Nobody would ever pick the ID, so I'm going to hide it here. So here, like due date, they would get the date from here, from the date table, so I'm going to hide it here. And in this case, I'm going to hide customer number in the receivables because it would make sense to get the customer number from the customer card. And in the customer credit, I'm also going to hide the customer card. And then that way, those fields are only appearing one time. All right. So now we are back to, and yes, tables can be annoying with that. We'll collapse that up. We're back to creating our data, the way our data set goes. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a matrix, and I'm a little over already, and my apologies. We're on the downhill slide for this, I promise. I'm going to, I put in a background. So I either like to come in and set the background color to something light, like this light gray, and I'll set the transparency so things stand out a little bit better. Or you can add in a whole image if you want to. And that's what I did for Dex Pro. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Let me cancel that and add it again. Background's the one I want. There we go. Okay, so now I have this background pre-built out, and I think it just makes things a little easier for me to find things. So I'm going to skip titles and things like that and just stick with the meat and the potatoes. So I'm going to add in a matrix right here. And here's my matrix. I enter in rows and columns. So what I'm going to do is come to my customer card, and for my rows, let me stretch that out. I'm going to put in customer class. That's what I missed, customer class. So you know what? I thought there was one more short. So I'm going to put it in state instead. Just bear with me. Okay, that way we don't have, I missed country too. Oh, I wanted to keep it nice and simple, but such is life. All right, we'll put in rows here, our customer name. And then what I'd like to do is go to the receivables transactions, and I'm going to get the document type and put in, and I'm going to get the document number and put that in. And then for the values, I'm going to find the balance or the amount due and put that in as the values. And I would normally format that, but I'm doing this based off time. So this is basically a summary of what's due. And if I were to open this up, whoops, if I clicked on this, I could see the different types of transactions, and then I could see the individual transactions. All right. So actually, let's leave that open for a moment. Now what I'm going to do in the columns is I'm going to come up to my aging buckets and just throw those in the columns. And just that quick, I now have an aging report, and it doesn't look like anything's past due, but they're aged in the order that I want them to be aged in. And or the aging buckets appear the way I want them to be aged. And that's really all it takes to create a summary trial balance. And then you could go a little step further. There we go. Let's try into, there we go, got them all back. And if you wanted to, oh, I meant to collapse them all. I'll right mouse click and collapse all. Okay, here we go. All right, so I could put in some slicers as well. So I'm going to put a slicer. Oops. My handlebars was on that one and I changed it. So I'm going to click anywhere else, take my handlebars off and put in a slicer. And just to kind of get a little feel here, I'm going to come in and say, go back to the customer card and say whether or not they're on hold. Oops, that's credit. And I will put that in the field. And then I do a little bit of, come on, where did I do with it? Customer hold field. There we go. So I could click yes and see all of the invoices that are for customers on hold, the ones that are not on hold, or I can clear them out. And I do a little bit more modeling. I'm not going to get into the detail of that right now, but you could add as many of these filters as you want or include other things if you want as well. I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this page, and I'm going to get rid of this one. I might keep this out here.
Hey, Belinda.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind going back to that previous slide so I can get the link and put that in the chat?
Yes. Yes. It is bit.ly lowercase, and I couldn't get to the chat to do it myself. So bit.ly /DexPro Belinda with B capitalized. And this is case sensitive.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Sorry. My apologies to whoever has to leave. I just had so much I wanted to show. It just was like, I can't get it all in. All right. And then I added in, or one more thing I want to add here, potentially would be some detailed information. So I'm just going to quickly add a little bit of detail in, and then I'll show you what I did on the finished product. So I'm not going to go through all the detail for right now, but I'll come in and just put like this detail in. So maybe amount due and values, and then I'm gonna come in here, and then for the credit limit, I'm gonna put in a card real fast. Okay, and the credit limit right here will be, I'm just gonna put in like last payment amount, and let me put in last payment date. That'll be better. Okay, so there's the last payment date. I would normally do a lot more cleanup. I'm going to take this hold slicer and I'm going to change it to the customer name. And here's why. So I have the customer name listed here. Over on this visual, I have the customer name listed. And I want to be able to make this visual link to this table. So what I'm going to do is in this with nothing selected in this drill through area for the page, I'm going to turn on the cross-reference report, and I'm going to say drill through when on the customer name. So now if I come back to page 1 and I right mouse click on a name, I have this drill through option, and it tells me, hey, go to this page, duplicate page, and now I'm just looking at information for this customer. And that's how I did it. And I'm going to go back and show you a little more on the finished product, and it'll make a lot more sense to you. And I'm going to duplicate this page real fast and get rid of these. In this slicer, though, I'm going to come up and I'm going to grab the year and the month. And I'm going to sort this in descending order. So the most recent's at the top. And I'm going to go ahead and select the month 10. Now I'm going to put an expected payment calendar in here. So I don't have a calendar icon visual. So I'm going to go click on the ellipsis and get more visuals. And I have a favorite, and it's in my slide deck. And my favorite one is when it pulls up. Come on. Okay, don't know what's going on with my internet. Okay, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to skip over to the finished one, and I'll show you what I did. Okay, and I realized I made a boo-boo on my date. See, this goes from 1 to 120 and 120 over. That should be 121 over, so I need to fix that. Okay, so I'll start back on this customer detail page. I also hid the page. You could see that way when I publish it, you wouldn't see this page and only from drill down. And then because it is a drill down page, it has this back option. So I created a matrix for just the last payment information, just the last statement information, just the last transaction information. Then I also created a card for the customer name, so I can see what customer I'm looking at, the contact, and the phone number for the contact. Then I did something really interesting right here. I added in the customer balance and their credit limit, and I created a DAX field, which shows me how much credit they have left. And they are over $16,000. So that's not a good thing. And I did that by, if I go to customer credit, I did another DAX tool here. And this is called a measure. And I've got it in my slide, and I'll focus on it a little bit more. But basically what I did was I said, all right, take the available credit. And a measure is just a formula. So I said, now in this formula, you're going to be summing. And you're going to do it line by line. That's what the X meant. So we're aggregating with the sum, and then we're doing an iteration for line by line. In the customer credit table, take the credit limit minus the customer balance. And that is the whole measure. That's all it is. So now I have something that we don't have in GP, the available credit, so I can monitor what the heck is going on. And I should have put in a unposted transactions filter over here besides just salesperson, so that we could filter those out if we wanted to. So there's two things I need to change. So that's what this table's about. Now, when I brought in this Breyer calendar, My machine, the tongue has been hanging out. I'm sorry that it kind of froze up. And we have been having internet issues in our house, network specifically. We have a pretty complex network for somebody's home. Between me working remotely with Power BI and my husband's a developer, we use TiVo, which is on internet, and every TV is connected to the TiVo with the internet. It's pretty complex. We have, multiple routers, multiple Wi-Fi. So when something goes out, it's a nightmare. So I digress. Sorry. What I did is just a little bit of formatting here so that month by month, I could see when money is due to come in. So if it's green, that means it's a bigger money day. And if it's pink or red, it's a lower money day. But I could literally see by looking on the calendar, if there's nothing there, I'm not expecting money in that month. But if there is, this is Fabricam. So there are tons of dates. So bear with me. Let me go to like there. Here's a mid one. And it's looking at across everything. So anyhow, you get the drift. It's pretty cool how this works. Normally you wouldn't have so many blank days, but normally you wouldn't have a handful of transactions across like 4 years in the future either. So you would be sticking to just transactions which have due dates, and it would match up accordingly. So this is our calendar, and I have formatted it according here. So let me go through back to my slide deck for a moment. And where did we leave off? Okay, so this is where we left off. So here is the DAX table again I created. And so if you get this, you can basically copy the code. Of course, if you also get the template, you'll have it in there as well. And then, whoops, I had one more piece of DAX in there. Here we go. And in this one, this DAX measure here, this is where we created, I have the available credit. I'm summarizing what the formula is to sum up numbers, and I'm calculating it line by line. And that way it'll be unique for each customer. So I have the customer credit table where I'm getting it from, and I'm taking the credit limit amount minus the balance, and then an ending parentheses for that. This is what my blank background screen looked like. I actually created it here in PowerPoint. So these are the pages of how I have it set up. I think I'm going to add one more in for the slicer filter. And then this is the visual that I used. And so let me go back to this visual for a moment, because I want to show you how I formatted it. So I'm going to select the table and go into format. So some of the things that I did was I changed the size of the text in the calendar format so they'd be a little bit larger, because they're just not long enough or big enough for me. And I did the same with the data size because I wanted to be able to read it. And then the other thing that I did is I went to data colors and I turned diverging on. I just slid it on, and then I added these colors in. And you can make them whatever color that you're interested in. And that's how I did the formatting. Now the fields I use, I just pulled the date field in and the balance field, and which is the amount due. And that's how I did the date field. So it's pretty straightforward. Actually, while I'm at it, you know what? Let's come in and let's shrink up salesperson. I'm going to copy customer inactive. And while I'm remembering, or while we're right here, let's come in. Oh, we wanted posted and unposted. So we're going to come and get document status, and then that'll take care of that. I am a big believer in copying and pasting after you get the format all set. And so let me clear that. Clear that. Don't know why I'm not seeing anything now. We'll delete that. Figure it out in a moment. I must have clicked on something that I wasn't supposed to click. So I'll do that in a moment. So that is, I boo-booed that up, didn't I? That is, you know, we'll do, this is what undo's for. Oh, not sure what I did. Oh, there we go. Okay. I had selected something that I didn't mean to select. Let's try it one more time. That is what undo is for. Document status. Where are you? Get rid of customer inactive. There we go. Now I can see if I want to see the unposted ones. There are the unposted transactions. So I don't know sure why they're coming up 0, but I can see them if I want to. All right, so that is Belinda's deck in a nutshell. Again, you could get the handout or the template, so you could use the template after I make those few changes by connecting to here. You guys have that. And again, I'd like to thank Marlena and her team. And if you want to go through these processes, you can see we cover lots of different pieces inside of Power BI. If you want to go through that process, including like building something like this out, then look for, we'll have it up this week, the class coming up, and it'll be a half-a-day class at a low entry cost. So, but at least it'll give you a hands-on experience. And that's it.